It is easy to say people should not drive fast, but if the roads invite to drive fast, it is very difficult to enforce a low speed limit. So what you should do there is make credible and safe speed limits and adjust the road design to that limit. And of course these limits are different depending on the function of the road. If there are people living and children crossing the streets, the limit should be 30 kilometers per hour. And yes, of course, at highways you can drive fast because you cannot crash into another car. So that's an important thing. Actually, that is 2 or 3 measures at the same time. A motorcycle or a moped, power two-wheelers are intrinsically very unsafe. Even if people are careful and have the right clothes and stick to the limit, but the power two-wheeler it's a two-wheeler, so it's a vehicle that has to balance. You can get easily off balance, and then so that is the same with cyclists. Of course, cyclists are also intrinsically unsafe because of their vehicle, but their speed is much lower. And it is virtually impossible to make a motorcycle safe. Perhaps we can find ways that people like to drive other vehicles than power two-wheelers sometime in the future. There were countries who succeeded in, for example, New Zealand. The number of fatalities went down enormously when in New Zealand they decided to import second-hand small cars. That was a good alternative for people who could not afford new cars, and they switched massively from motorcycle to car, and that was good for safety. Cycling is considered not very safe, but it is very healthy. It's good for the environment. It's good for the noise and pollution and so on. So if we decide to switch from car or motorcycle or moped to cycle, what you can expect is about the same number of fatalities, but a lot more serious injuries, because people fall off their bike. Now in Spain this is not considered a crash with a single vehicle or two cyclists is not considered a traffic crash. It's not a road accident or a road crash because there's no motor vehicle involved. But on the other hand, if people switch from car to bicycle and they have a crash on their bicycle, who is responsible if you do not consider it a road crash? So I would say consider it a road crash, and then you have to look at those crashes. What's the matter with those cyclists falling off their bike? In the Netherlands, more than half of all serious injuries are cyclists who have fallen off their bike. Perhaps we should have to do research because we do not know much about cyclists. There's a lot of research about safe cars, a lot of crash tests and so on. So we have an enormous history in research in that field. We have almost no history in the research of bicycle safety. All people make mistakes, and all people sometimes are disobedient and speed a little. There is a very strong relation between speeding or traffic violations and being involved in crashes. And that is so incredibly strong, that relation, that if it were possible to prevent people from making violations, many, and I'm not talking about one violation annually, for example, but a ticket for one violation annually, but I mean people who have 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 tickets annually for speeding or red light negating. If we could change the behavior of those people to the average of, well, making one violation annually, that would mean halving the number of fatalities. Halving. So, whereas the number of people with 2 or 3 or 5 violations is really small. So they are really a danger on the road, and they don't know that because most of them make those violations, and they say, well, I make those violations, but I'm not unsafe. Nothing happens. Until something happens, and then they're dead.